We're here at the National Museum Cardiff for the opening of Artes Mundi 7 to speak to John Akomfrah about his film piece, Auto da Fe. Your work for Artes Mundi is a 40-minute film piece called Auto da Fe, focusing on religious persecution as a major cause of global displacement. Can you say a bit more about the work?
Yes, I mean, the work is about religious persecution, but in a way it's much more about living with precarity. And it's about communities and identities that have been shaped by having to either move, migrate, forced or unforced, or otherwise, rather, forced or otherwise, to forced into creating identities for themselves that involve a move away. And it just struck me that actually quite a lot of my work and a lot of the work of people I've admired over the years are always about things that are sort of either fixed or in the process of becoming, right? And they're largely of large groups that, you know, okay, they face sexism, racism, whatever, but generally they're communities. You know, this is really an attempt to understand what it's like when all of those things are things you can't take for granted. You know, who you are, gender or otherwise, male or female, all of those things are up in the air because the background to your life is this thing coming saying you will die because we don't like what it is that you stand for, or you will die because we can't provide for you as a group, you know, or you die because what you represent is a threat to who we are, blah, blah, blah. You know, those sorts of big backdrop questions.
And that relates to the title, Auto da Fe.
Yes, because Auto da Fe was the uniquely Latin American variant of the Inquisition. This was the process by which conversos or Ashkenazi Sephardic Jews who'd left Europe, essentially because they were kicked out of Isabella's Spain and Portugal in the 15th century, then find themselves being chased by this machinery of Inquisition and terror. And the process of that Inquisition was called the Auto da Fe. You know? So the work is named partly in recognition of that, but also to highlight the fact that there are incredible similarities between what happened in that moment, a century of persecution in Latin America, and what's been happening in several parts of the globe really since then.
Where is it filmed?
Well, we spent a lot of time in Barbados because Barbados was really the genesis of the piece. I was there in 2009, and by chance happened to wander into a cemetery. It was a Sephardic cemetery. I had no idea that there was such a community in the Caribbean, you know, in between, I would say, the 1640s and the 1840s. I had no idea. And the course, the desire to find out who they were and how they got there was what led to the piece, really. So Barbados was our central location, you know, but we spent time doing bits in England, as usual, because I live here, I'm from here, and I'd like to work here occasionally. But yeah, that's it. Tiny bits shot in Greece, nothing that anyone would notice, but those three countries provided a central locations.
And what do you gain by having the two different screens running parallel?
I'm much more interested in the moment. I spent a lot of time doing work that's about what I call causality, questions of causality. It's how narrative is supposed to work in moving image. You know, A, it meets B, and then it leads to C. That sort of thing. And I've done a lot of work in that way, and I'm interested in pursuing that. But increasingly, I'm also interested in working on stuff that's about simultaneity rather than causality, where things are not necessarily happening because they affect each other, but the fact that they're happening at the same time in different locales, let's say, has an impact. They don't necessarily have a, so for instance, there's a sequence in Artes Mundi where you've got two characters, one man and a woman, one in a cemetery and the other one sitting inside. Now, there's no logical connection between the two. They happen to be husband and wife, but that's not the point. The point is that two people, both of whom are trying to understand why they've arrived in the Caribbean, are in two separate spaces. And the fact that those spaces are put together tells you something immediately. It's not telling you something along the lines of she had an argument with him and then walked out, or they had a disagreement. It's just two people in two separate spaces doing their own thing. But the fact that you can basically juxtapose those two moments of intimacy says something about them, the community, the location they're in. So I'm much more interested in working and pursuing that at the moment.
You've spoken before about your works being like visual essays or tone poems.
Yes.
Would you consider this work to be along those lines as well?
Sometimes you say things just off the top of your head, and then they come back at you. You go, "Oh yes, I did say the work is like a tone poem." I'm interested in the notion of a tone poem. One, because it comes from poetry and music. Two, because it meant a lot to the German Romantic tradition, musical tradition. And I'm interested in trying to explore what we do in the present by looking at examples of the same sort of drift in other traditions. So the tone poem was very, very important for music, and the work is sort of musical in ambition and motivation. So I hope that people see it as a tone poem, yes.
And definitely distinct from a documentary, for example.
Oh, very distinct from a documentary. In a sense, the documentaries, to the extent that documentaries rely on observable entities, on speech, on questions of the causality that I spoke about. I committed this crime because I was poor. To the extent that it's avoiding all of those, it's not documentary. It's non-fiction, but definitely not documentary. No, nothing against documentaries. I make them and I will continue to make them, but these are not documentaries. No.
What influence did Andrei Tarkovsky have on you and your work?
Oh, Tarkovsky's. Andrei Tarkovsky's. To call him an influence sounds a little bit trite now, I think. I would have said a couple of years back that he was an influence. But what I think now is that he's a sort of universe. Tarkovsky provided not just me, but a whole number of us with the sense of what the world could be and how one might place images in it, and that is still the example. Yeah, I don't do it in the way that he did. I'm not necessarily interested in doing how he did it or what he did it for or the rest of it. So for instance, he was devoutly religious and I'm not. But I still think that search, which his images always had, that sort of agnostic search for value and meaning and relation between character and landscape. All of these are questions that I'm still interested in, and would not have been had I not come across him. Yeah.
You were one of the founders of the Black Audio Film Collective, which was active between 1982 and 98.
Yes.
What was the purpose of this collective at the time, and how was it run, and what do you think is its most important legacy now?
Black Audio Film Collective was really a sort of a gesture of friendship between a number of people. All of them wanted to work in one form or another with moving image culture, with the essay form, but these were things we learned largely through that friendship. So we were together for 16, 17 years, between 82 and 98, 99. We made a series of essay films, documentaries, TV programs, cinema pieces, installations, etc., etc. And the thing that united us was that all of us were of color, post-migrant kids. Where all of our parents were people who migrated to England sometime between 55 and 65, and that made us uniquely the first post-migrant generation in the country. And it felt to us as if growing up in the 60s and 70s, the spaces that needed to be available that would allow us to be fully formed human beings just wasn't there, and rather than say, oh, okay, well, I think society should do this for us, we were saying that too, but we realized that we had both an ethical and political responsibility to make our own stuff, make our own images, narratives, set of reflections, anything that would just say to people, this is who we are, and we are slightly more complicated than the parents who gave birth to us, because one, yes, we're aware of being of having heritage from elsewhere, true, but we'd also been formed in this space, usually metropolitan spaces, with their own uniquely English, British pools on your character, your being, your makeup. And so it needed something to happen. And I think the impact of it has been pretty unique, really. I mean, listen, 7, 8 of us in this collective, we go to a conference in 1982, which is supposed to be for black artists. And there was a room full of people. If you call a similar conference now, there'll be a hall full, certainly. Maybe more. I don't know, I've never counted how many young people of color want to call themselves artists. But it seems to me that there's been a huge shift, an explosion almost of talent. And I think we had something, not all, but something to do with that,
And does your work now still have a sort of political comment or statement to make?
Yes and no. I mean, it has a political dimension in a way that it always did. I mean, I was, as part of this collective, very interested in what the language of how to bring something called the aesthetic with something called the political, which basically means we were interested in the form, the form ideas about who we were took, And I'm still, in a way, very, very preoccupied with that question of form, because it seems to me that the form is really uppermost. That's it. Because you can say to a group of people, we don't believe that you are, I don't know, civilized or rich or poor. But unless they can find a form through which they refute or agree with you, it's not going to happen. So the question of form, the question of discourse is absolutely central. It was then, it still is to me, yes.